you know, we still need the stories, whether we read modern novels or not. It's like, you know, we need that connection, whether it's with our elders or with our kids. You know, we pass these stories on as something precious. For me personally, it's probably just the unknown, you know. I've always been drawn more to the unknown and whatever the beyond of normal life. So I would actually go out and look for these. You know, we would go to haunted houses. We would go to haunted areas of the cities. See what was going on, you know? Yeah, now, whatever that comes from, I don't know. But it kept life interesting.
It was almost like an escape.
Definitely an escape. Family life was not a happy life. So that was an escape, definitely.
Hey, welcome to the Floaties for Krakens podcast. I am your host, Camille Maria Costa, and it is a brilliant day to be monstrous. Well, hello, cuddlefish. We've made it. We've made it to the middle of September, which, of course, since you clicked on this video, you know what that means. It is Latin History Month. Oh my gosh, the best time of the year. I'm biased, but I think it's a great time. Not only is it spooky season and fall, and we're feeling the brisk weather, but we get an entire month just freaking celebrating Latine amazing human beings. And I'm so excited to be starting our first episode of our version of Latine Heritage Month with just an incredible array of individuals for a little special that is called Ay, That's Creepy, para Krakens. I love the title. It took me a while to come up with the title. I was like, what encapsulates what it's like to be Latino and into the supernatural, into the monstrous, into the other. And I'm like, that's just kind of our whole existence. And then I was like, well, what would my grandma say? Bless her heart, if she was here. What would she say? And she'd be like, ay, that's creepy. So thank you, Grandma Licha. Now that is what our show is called. So welcome to our incredible series. I'm so excited over the next few weeks for you to listen to some brilliant Latino creators, just move makers, individuals that are just paving the way for so many of us. Just excited storytellers. We're also going to be exploring some Latino monsters and legend telling and folkways. So I'm thrilled. I'm so happy to be a part of this and to present it to you all. And I'm just buckle up, Buttercup. Cuddles, it's gonna be a great special. So thank you for coming. Yay, Latine heritage, and get ready for Ay, That's Creepy. And of course, who else is going to open our amazing celebration? None other than the incredible Ayden Castellanos, otherwise known as the Susto podcast. Oh my gosh. Ayden is incredible. Ayden is the sweetest human being on the freaking planet. Ayden does incredible work in the monster supernatural world, specifically highlighting Latine cultures and Hispanic heritage and kind of their importance and their necessity and how cultural tradition is so important. And he's just incredible. He's so smart and so all-knowing and just, so selfless, as you'll see in this episode. But it was just a true joy to speak to this individual. My goodness, just so incredible. go check them out. Susto podcast. If you don't know what Susto means, keep watching this episode because Ayden gives a lovely description of a very important word in our community. So yeah, anyway, Ayden's lovely. I love Ayden so much. Also, Ayden is supernaturally charged, and you'll see that in this episode as well. But anyway, Ayden taught me a hell of a lot. No pun intended. You can tell that the supernatural, and specifically how important that is, right, to Latine communities, is just, if not more important to him. And he's so just inspiring and makes you not only want to be a better podcaster, but just a better scholar and more of a fighter for your community. And I couldn't think of a better person to open up our special with. So, Ayden, you're incredible. I can't wait to talk to you more. I'm so excited to have you on the show more, so please come back anytime. But you're just a joy. You're pure joy, and I'm excited to see the things that you're going to bring to the world. And I'll be first in line to hear them because you're incredible, and I can't wait. But anyway, you're here for the show. You're here for the show, so might as well get to it, right? Ladies and cuttlefish, let me introduce to you Elevating Your Wounds para Tlahuelpuchis. Well, hello, Ayden.
Hello, Camille.
How are you on this lovely Sunday?
This lovely spooky Sunday. I'm truly bringing the Sunday scaries to life. I told you ahead of time, but to anybody listening right now, I'll mention it again. Suddenly, I've been
Wait, okay, Ayden, as soon as you said that, static started on your mic. Ah!
listen. Oh my God, I don't know
Okay, you sound
what's
great. You
going
sound
on.
great now,
Okay,
but that
okay.
was crazy.
Listen, I'm telling you, I truly brought the spooky with me. A thunderstorm just rolled in, so we may hear some of that in my background. Our room was in control of itself, and it kept kicking us out, and we had to
Yeah.
start a new one.
I don't you are a beautiful human, I can tell already, and I'm excited to see what other magicalness will happen throughout
We'll
this.
call it that. We'll call it magic.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually listening. I know we're gonna get to the interview, everybody, but I was listening to the Susto podcast, which is Ayden's amazing podcast that he's gonna talk to you all about. But I know you were just at a festival, right,
Mhm.
recently? So maybe that's where all the all the
I know, right?
creepiness.
Just picked up all this, like, energy. It's just an abundance of energy that's now following me. I'm here for it, though. I like it.
I feel like it's wonderful. It just you were talking about, in that episode how it just kind of refuels you and gets you excited to keep podcasting or researching or collaborating, and I
Mhm.
don't know, I think it's wonderful energy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, for people who may not know, would you please mind introducing yourself and telling
Oh,
us a
of
little bit about
course.
who you are and what you do?
Yes. Hey, Ghoulfriends. My name is Adrian or Ayden, either way. I'm the host of the podcast Susto, which, for anybody who maybe has not heard that word or phrase before, Susto is a Spanish word for fright. And some cultures believe it's a cultural illness where, after a big scare or something traumatic, the soul separates itself from the body. And depending on which community or which culture you're speaking to, there are different remedies for this. But I titled my podcast Susto because it's centered on paranormal folklore from Latin American and Hispanic cultures.
Just my cup of tea. It's so fantastic what you do. And as soon as I saw the name too, I was like, this is impeccable. Like,
Yeah.
I love that term susto. I mean, it's such a I haven't heard that term, gosh, I think since like my dad's aunts and tias and like used to visit us from Mexico, and I would hear that term often thrown around. You know what I mean? I hadn't heard it in a minute, and it's such a great name for a show. So
Yeah, thank
perfect.
you.
I
Thank you.
love it. I
Putting
love it.
that PR degree to use, using it for something.
I love it. As you should. As you
Yeah.
should.
Mhm.
So, where did the spookiness come from? What first drew you to it? What were your first experiences to that world?
Yeah. I mean, truly, I was exposed to it because of my family. You know, like you just mentioned, growing up, you had family that would talk about it a lot. And I was brought up a very similar way. You know, anytime that we experienced susto at home, my mom's remedy was a spoonful of sugar and a glass of water. You just dilute it
Mhm.
and then you chug it, and that's supposed to curarte del susto.
Yep, yep.
And aside from that, I've always been really into this stuff. I have a book actually. I'm gonna pause really quick so I can grab it because I have it here on
Please
my bookshelf.
do. Go
Give me
grab
one
it.
second. Okay.
Mm.
So I have a book here that they used to read to us in elementary school, and I'm trying not to catch the glare, but it's called Stories That Must Not Die.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this is actually the copy from my elementary classroom.
Oh,
And
Ayden.
it has my mom's name right here
Oh
because she
my
used to
god.
volunteer in my schools growing up. And so they would read this to us, and this book has all these stories. Uh, the first one, Dancing with a Ghost. And it also had these amazing illustrations. Like, that's appropriate for
Oh,
a class full
totally.
of like third graders or something.
Not
Um,
traumatizing at all.
but they would read these to us. You can see here it's in English and Spanish. And then at the end of each story, there was a set of questions, also in English and Spanish. So, in the sense, they were teaching us reading comprehension by
Yeah.
way of folklore, because these aren't all scary stories. It's like a general kind of folk tales collected from the Texas Mexico border. But they definitely had some spooky stories in here, like the story of La Llorona is in here, La Lechuzas, the girl who danced with the devil. They're all in
Oof.
here. So yeah, it's very ingrained in my upbringing. And I talk about this often too. I was raised Catholic. I no longer identify with that religion,
Me
but
too.
I mean, Catholicism, it's just like it's inherently spooky when you think about it. A group of people get together once a week and they say their spells, prayers.
Correct.
They do their rituals
Mhm.
with burning incense and praying to their deity, and then they drink their deity's blood and eat his flesh,
That is correct.
all the while he's hanging above you on the wall. Like, come
Giant.
on.
Like
Yeah, and then people wonder, oh, what why are you into this? I'm like, well, I was raised Catholic, first and
literally. That was the first
foremost.
scary story. Truly.
But yeah, truly, yeah. The punishment of hell just looming over you. Something about that. But yeah, no, I've always been into these stories, and so when I started listening to podcasts, I wanted to hear a podcast about these stories, and I had a very clear vision of what I wanted it to sound like, what I wanted to be structured like, and I didn't find anything that aligned with that perfectly. So I attribute it to being a Virgo rising, and I
Ugh,
said I will do it myself. And
period.
yeah, 5 years later, here I am.
Ugh. Doing just amazing things. And like, I just want to thank you so much for creating that voice for Latinos because, and we're going to really get into this during this interview, but like that, the spooky world and horror and just the exploration of ghosts and the supernatural and the other, right, is a tool of communication for us, right?
Mhm.
Like it is a way that we connect to so much more than, the story is incredible, but we connect to each other and to our family members and to our history and to our culture. And I mean, it's just so layered and so complex. And I think that's why it's so amazing that you dedicated an entire show to
Thank
that
you.
specifically, right? To diving deep and unraveling so much. It's
Yeah.
so spectacular. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, absolutely, I agree with you. And in a sense, also, it's a preservation of culture. It's a way to keep the culture alive, because if you visit or if you learn about any culture,
Mm.
you can tell a lot about that culture by way of its folklore, of its stories, and how they're told. And I think that's why I kind of take like some people have said a more quote academic approach,
Mm.
or I like to say it's just like a nerdier approach where I really try and like dissect and peel back what's behind these stories, because yeah, you can learn a lot about people, again, by way of their stories. But I will also say, I mean, thank you so much for the kind words, but I always try to remind people that I have not created anything new. I'm not inventing anything. I am participating in the very long-standing tradition of oral storytelling, which
Sure.
I know applies to many cultures, but it's such a big part of Latina cultures. And this is just my contribution to it. I happen to like being, I guess, an entertainer, and I love digital production. So I said, okay, this is how I can contribute to that. So yeah.
Well, you're so kind and so humble. And I just will say again, right? Like, I totally respect that and understand, but you're still doing the work. You're out here doing the work and you're spreading the word about it, right? And making, I don't know, like just talking about this stuff and nerding out about this stuff
Mhm.
more accessible for people and
Yeah, yeah.
approachable,
Mhm.
right? So I
Thank
love
you.
it. It's incredible. Yeah. And on that note too, I'm curious of your thoughts. Why do you think that like the Latinx like communities and cultures and things are so comfortable with the horror, with the spookiness, with the world of the other? Why do you think that is such a big part of the culture?
Yeah. I think I feel like maybe any marginalized group of people can relate to horror or to the paranormal or to things that are scary. So, like the theme of trauma comes up a lot in my show,
Mm,
and even just down to my personal base understanding of what a haunting is or what a spirit is I don't believe it always is someone's soul that is earthbound. I
mm,
think that sometimes it's just an impression of energy due to, and it doesn't even have to be like negative trauma, but it could be if someone lived in a house their whole life and they lived so much of their life in their house, in that house, then they leave like an energy impression behind.
mm,
And so I think unfortunately a lot of the time bigger spikes in energy come from traumatic events or from tragedy. And I think we as Latina people, there is a lot of tragedy behind or in our history. And I think it also applies to the same way that a lot of queer people, again, me, for example, I think a lot of the reason that I identify with horror and with monsters and evil spirits is because of that whole, I guess, sensation of feeling like you are the outsider,
mm,
you are othered, or you are a monster. You know, sometimes as queer people, we are quite literally told, you are bad, you are evil,
mm.
you are a monster. And so I think it's easy to draw kind of like an attachment to villains. It's why, you know, all the little gay boys loved Ursula and Cruella de Vil growing up, myself included.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's just a safe, like it's a safe space almost because you see
Mhm.
yourself represented on screen or through like oral like storytelling, right? Or
Mhm.
in comic books or books, right? Like it's like, oh my gosh, I am that person,
Yeah.
right? And it can be a positive thing because it's like I'm finally there, and also as you mentioned, extremely negative because whoever has the privilege of calling somebody a monster in a negative way,
Mhm.
right, that sticks with you,
Yeah.
that stays with you for a very long, as you said, it haunts you, right?
It haunts you. Very fitting.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what
Mhm.
do you think your definition of a monster is?
Ooh. I think it's something or someone that is misunderstood,
Yeah.
whether or not that thing or that person is in fact bad, or is objectively doing bad things. I think that's a different question.
Yeah.
But again, the term monster I think is so subjective based on who you're asking. Like again, I think monsters can be very cool. I think they can be interesting,
Yeah.
but definitely misunderstood. I think if you think about the story of La Llorona, especially with uh, um like feminist studies, a lot of feminists and uh, writers, authors, entertainers are you see a lot of like reclamation of La Llorona's story, because I mean when you think about it in reality, this was a woman who a lot of people believe that the actual origin of that story is the story of La Malinche, the
Mm-hmm.
woman that was indentured to Hernan Cortez to aid him in his conquest.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you can imagine that being put in that situation will drive you to do terrible things because you're choosing survival or death. And
Right.
so, yeah, again, it's one of those like maybe that story has been misunderstood or misinterpreted, and it just became, oh well, this woman was so heartbroken that she did the unthinkable. How could she turn her back on her motherhood?
Right.
And and the
Right.
same thing with like La Lechuza. I talk a lot
Oh,
about how witches maybe are not bad. Not all witch hashtag not all witches, but like brujeria is not inherently evil. It comes down to the individual level. Again, it's not being a monster as bad as what is that monster doing? How are they behaving?
exactly.
Yeah, I think just this idea of being misunderstood and misrepresented intentionally.
It's a perfect definition. 100%. It's layered, of course, like you said,
Yeah.
in situational context and things, but overall, right, the blanket feeling is
Mhm,
that there's no one trying to understand who that is. And I
mhm,
think that's where a lot of fear comes from anyway, right? Is just not understanding things. That's
yeah.
the base of it.
Hmm.
The unknown, I guess you could say. But I think
Absolutely.
God, it hurts even more when you think about like these monsters that are simply just misunderstood, but people choose not to further understand who they were, or what they do, or who they are as, creatures. It's an interesting battle, that definition. It really
For sure.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to get into our monster. It's going to be so much fun.
Mhm,
But I'm curious, if I know you said you like to nerd out about this stuff. So I guess to learn a little bit more about this monster, I wanted to know if you can teach us a little bit more about, the indigenous cultures of Mexico, but like more importantly, their ties to kind of the
mhm.
world of the spooky.
Yeah. So I'll preface this by saying that I wouldn't consider myself like an expert or a spokesperson of indigenous people or community in Mexico. I do learn a lot about them in, my research for the show.
Of course.
Um, and it also, I mean, not to like divert the question, but I would say I've done a lot of kind of like reflection on my own ancestry,
Yeah.
and I've never been part of indigenous community, so I wouldn't claim that, but I have been able to find like the parts in Mexico that my ancestry goes back to, and so it's made a lot of this work very interesting. uh,
Totally.
but I will say, I think one of the things that I've spoken a lot about recently is, and we're going to talk about something similar today to our monster today, but La Lechuza, for example, is closely related. It's a bird. It's an owl,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure what it is about. I'll say again, from my own perspective, I'm Mexican American, but I don't know what it is about Mexican people and birds. I don't know what this beef is that we have with birds, why we're scared of them.
It's
But
there.
it's there. But as far as the lechusa, the owl is, I I read that a lot of Mesoamerican culture, or Mesoamerican cultures believed that owls were messengers from the underworld. So based on their beliefs and their practices, is they understood this creature to be a literal omen of
Mhm.
death, of the underworld. Because what other reason do you have for seeing an owl other than they just came from there to
Mhm.
either warn you or maybe pick you up? Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, there is that interesting tie to bird like creatures.
Definitely. It's like I remember very distinctly the night that, so I grew up in El Paso, right? El Paso, Texas.
Mhm,
And I remember the night that my grandma passed, right? It was so many things going on, and it was almost like a blur.
mhm,
But I remember so vividly that on her street there was a barn owl. Giant barn. And I never saw those in El Paso ever. I saw a bunch of other kinds of owl, but I never saw a barn owl with the big black eyes, just, and I was
mhm.
like, "Oh my God." Like it truly freaked me out. And
Yeah.
to bring back that word again, it is a haunting kind of feeling when you see
Mhm,
stuff like that. But I think there was also a moment of peace, like
mhm.
almost, okay, this is real, she's gone.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
Mhm.
But you're right, it's so intertwined in our folklore and our folk life and who we are as people. Oh my gosh, some of my family members like won't even go near any bird, not even just owls. And then there's other community members and family members I have that love birds, right? Like they want everything to do with them, they want to respect them. But it's fascinating. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say more than anything for me, it's definitely like a respect thing. If I
Yeah.
happen to see an owl or a lechuza out in the wild, I approach it more with, I mean, basically not approaching it and just kind of,
Yeah.
leaving it be. But also being like, what a beautiful creature.
Yeah.
May or may not be a witch. I don't know. But I'm like, hello, sister. Have a good evening. I
Yeah.
hope you're doing well. And then I keep it pushing.
Yeah.
I will say I've seen, unfortunately, it's really sad. A lot of people, or I've seen instances in which people capture owls
Mm,
and they do what they think is necessary to rid their community of evil.
right.
And so it's really sad because it's, ultimately it's a living thing.
Hmm.
Um, and folklore aside, if you take the superstitious out of it, that's an animal.
Yeah.
And it's I've unfortunately been exposed to like videos of that against my, sometimes you're scrolling Twitter and you just see
Oh,
horrible
of
things on
course. Yeah.
there.
It's terrible.
But yeah, I've seen these things, and yeah, it's horrible. And so I think, again, a lot of this like mis misunderstanding and misrepresentation of things, it leads to real life consequences sometimes. And so yeah, I would just encourage people, regardless of the superstitions, leave other living things alone, leave them in peace. Please.
Please, please.
Yeah.
They're just there. They're just doing their own thing, right?
Mm,
And no, I'm right there with you, 100%. Yeah. So,
mhm.
who is the infamous Tlahuelpuchi? I'm so excited.
So a Tlahuelpuchi is a shape-shifting bloodsucker. It is it's you could compare it to the experience of a werewolf. So anybody can be a Tlahuelpuchi, and if you were a Tlahuelpuchi, you would have the power to transform into this bird-like creature. They kind of describe it as like a turkey,
Yeah.
vulture, humanoid kind of combination. And a lot of people are born as Tlahuelpuchis, and they may not know that they are a Tlahuelpuchi until they start seeing the signs, namely until they start craving blood as
Mhm.
sustenance. And it's there. It says that the transformation happens in different ways, but Tlahuelpuchis do have to feed on blood once a month. And when they hunt, it's typically on dark, cold, and rainy nights, much like what's
Hello.
happening here in Austin around me right now. And when they hunt, allegedly they have a particular taste for the blood of infants.
Mm.
And there are many ways to protect yourself and your babies from Tlahuelpuchis. Some of those are by putting sharp objects under your pillow, your bed, or the baby's crib,
Okay.
by leaving a soiled diaper by the crib. And these aren't surefire ways, unfortunately. They are just preventative measures.
Yeah.
Um, but aside from people being born as Tlahuelpuchis, it's possible to become one. If you were to kill a Tlahuelpuchi, then you yourself would become one. If a family member outs somebody else, if they have knowledge of their relative being a Tlahuelpuchi and they out them as one, then they become one themselves as
Uh-oh.
well. And so it becomes this thing where if people have knowledge of a family member, a relative being a Tlahuelpuchi, they just kind of live with it in silence and in shame and fear. um, I think one of the reasons that the legend of the Tlahuelpuchi is so impactful and why I like telling it, it facilitates a really interesting discussion, is because there have been documented cases. Um, the story is kind of it's or one of the most popular stories about Tlahuelpuchis is rooted in real events. So
Mm.
in this very rural area in Mexico, called Tlaxcala, there was, I think it's called San Pedro Xolotla.
Okay.
There's this community in like the 50s and 60s. Uh, and this sociologist was already in the community, was already doing his anthropological studies.
Okay.
And while he was there, overnight one night, there were 7 infant deaths. And this community was struck. It was a huge tragedy. It was a small
Yeah.
community, and I actually have a book about that too.
Oh my gosh.
But the sociologist, he shifted gears on his research to focus on this phenomena. You know, what happened in one night, how it changed the community, how they reacted to it,
Sure.
because their explanation for it was by saying it was the Tlahuelpuchi epidemic. We've been attacked by a Tlahuelpuchi.
Mm-hmm.
This creature, this monster, this person
Mm-hmm.
came through our community and took our babies. And it was actually, it was a pretty large part of their population. I forgot exactly what the numbers are, but again, it was a really small community. And I think it was like, I think in total there was maybe 14 families with infants, and half of them were affected by this.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's a very interesting observation, I'll say, is what this sociologist did, was of how this community reacted to tragedy and processed their trauma with the supernatural, with the paranormal, and with monsters.
Oh. Oh my gosh. Okay, you mentioned so many things I'm excited to get into.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Okay, okay, okay. I'm going to, start already with what you just said. I think that concept of finding just like an easier way to swallow that pill, right? An easier way to process things, are often through metaphor, or often through, right, escapism in some way. And I think it is very interesting. That I can't. I want to read that study. When, if you can let me know what that book was, I would love to read it.
Yeah, actually, I think I have it here too. Let me reach for it.
Yes,
This is why people are like, "Oh, that's the nerdy show," because I'm always like, "I have a book about that." Okay, give me
right.
one second. I need to just start keeping these books like on my desk in front of me because I'm always reaching for them. Yeah, it's called Blood-Sucking Witchcraft,
Oh
and
my
it is
gosh.
by
Okay.
Hugo Nutini, and it is like a pretty, you see I have my little tabs in it already.
Yeah, you're so
Uh,
prepared.
but but yeah, it's a pretty dense read. It is
Yeah.
very I would say it is like it's an academic book in nature.
Okay.
And so if if you enjoy that, or if you know anybody who does, definitely a good read. And yeah, I'm making my way through it very slowly
As
because
you, yeah, take
I'm
your
reading
time.
things like 5 times over. I'm like, okay, I think I get what that means now. So yeah.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, okay. I'm going to rewind a little bit
Mhm,
to really get into this. So, you started to mention, right, like what they look like, right,
mhm.
traditionally in a lot of narratives. Do you mind describing it, like from head to toe, like what you may see if you run into one?
So it can present itself in different ways, actually. So I think
Yeah.
most popular is this idea that it's this kind of turkey vulture
Right.
hybrid, but it's a giant bird, much like La Lechuza.
Yeah.
It's a human-sized bird, and people also say that it can manifest itself or transform basically into a ball of light.
Yes.
So in the
Yes.
story that, or on Susto, the actual episode that I did about Tlahuelpuchis is at one point um, someone saw a ball of light floating outside of their window, and so it can travel that way. It can also travel as a mist that
Mm,
can m- put people or make people unconscious, or keep them asleep, and that's also mentioned in the episode that I do.
right.
So yeah, it's interesting that it has these different like forms of being, is not only just a physical monster body but also a ball of light or a
Yes.
mist, which is very, it's interesting. um and I think that makes it scarier because it's like, okay, well, this thing can just get into your house anyway. It doesn't matter if your doors and windows are locked because it can seep in through the bottom. It's light, light travels through
Yeah.
glass,
Right.
so
Oh.
yeah, it's a very it's a very mysterious creature because of, again, how it can transform.
Yes, of course. Oh my gosh, that's so haunting. Again, that's the only word I'm going to use
Word of the
this
day.
episode. Word of the day.
Yeah.
It's so scary, and you're right. Like the multiple. I mean, it virtually sounds indestructible, right? There are
Mhm,
so many ways that it can do what it wants and hunt, right?
mhm,
And it's so frightening. And I don't know why shapeshifting is such an interesting kind of subtype, right, of
mhm.
the world of monsters. Why do you think shapeshifters are so darn terrifying, Aiden?
um I don't know. I think I think at like at a really high level is if you're faced with fighting a monster for your life,
Yeah.
is I mean that's already scary enough. Is this thing that you don't understand, that you've never seen before, possibly. But also, I think what makes a shapeshifter extra scary is because if you're fighting a monster and you say, okay, this is what this thing is, I've happened to discover what its weaknesses are and how I can fight it back. But then if it transforms, that all just resets, and you have to now relearn this thing and say, okay, so actually I don't understand this, and
Yeah.
maybe I don't know what those weaknesses are. Maybe those weaknesses change because it itself has changed.
Mm.
um, but also on the other side of that, I think the power of transformation can be very powerful. Again, I always take it back to kind of like a place of reclamation and
Mhm.
power and positivity. Is again, as we mentioned earlier, this conversation about why maybe marginalized communities have an affinity for horror and the paranormal is, and I think the story of shapeshifters, of any shapeshifter, is really comforting, is because that power to transform grants you a way to survive, basically.
Mm.
um, as if you think about like brujeria, for example.
Mm.
uh, Brujeria itself, that witchcraft, that is not what it always was. If you
Right.
think back to pre-colonial times, it probably definitely looked very different.
Mhm.
But because of the imposition of Catholicism and Christianity,
Yeah.
those practices had to change. And so if you look at modern brujeria, a lot of it has very Catholic, either iconography or verbiage or even rituals are similar, even though it's not Catholic. And then um,
Mm.
yeah, so just that, like that idea that, but again, I guess what I'm trying to say is that that practice had to change, it had to transform.
Mm.
And again, brujeria, I mean, traditionally most Christians would tell you that is evil. It's
Mhm.
bad. Again, monsters are evil. It's bad.
Right.
But it had this power to transform, or it transformed to keep its power.
Mm.
Yeah, again, just like kind of transformation as
Yes.
as like a preservation tool, I think is
It's
kind of what that means to me.
it's beautiful. It's powerful. It's so powerful,
Thank you.
right? And yes, of course, terrifying if you're confronted with it, but
Mhm,
I don't know. It's smarter than you think it is, right? Its
mhm,
adaptability is so much
mhm.
more further advanced than you
Yeah,
could ever imagine, and that is scary. That is terrifying.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so speaking of the hunt, I know you had mentioned, right, that there is a couple of weaknesses, maybe. I know you said kind of hiding sharp objects, or
Mhm,
since the Tlahuelpuchi is more interested in, infants or younger children, to kind of play with the idea of the crib or the soiled diaper or something of
mhm.
that nature, right? Why do you think there is a fascination there with infants or with children? I know, I mean, I think across cultures, right, there are many
Mhm.
different types of entities or monsters or what have you that specifically hunt children or babies or
Yeah.
infants, and I'm curious why you think that is in this case.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, and I don't think I've come across anything that says this is why they
Yeah.
crave, this specific kind of blood.
Sure.
Uh, I think it might, though, just be the idea of, well, these are pure beings, they're innocent, so their blood is pure. And as you get older, you become, I quote, I guess, less innocent, or you make mistakes, or so
Mm.
I'm assuming it has something to do with that idea of these are innocent beings, their blood is more pure than someone who's been here longer.
Oh.
um, but yeah, I haven't really come across anything that says definitively why that is.
I mean, that would make sense, right? That would totally make sense.
Yeah, you
And
would want a clean glass of water to drink, and
yeah,
not something from the
exactly.
Seine River. Yeah.
Refreshing.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think you could think about it, as we were talking about oral storytelling and things. Of course, monsters that eat children are a big tactic for like morals of the story, right? Or making sure one story has a moral code, like you better be good or you better, be inside by XYZ or whatever. But I don't know. I love your idea of this, innocence, right? This
Mhm.
sense of purity and ignorance, and in a wonderful way that um, is so almost opposite of what society has made you, right? Like we
Yeah.
hear Tlahuelpuchi, and you think of all these different things, what it looks like, what it could be, how it acts, how it hunts, how it's otherized, and those little innocent babies, right? They're the complete opposite. Well,
Yeah.
on paper, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so interesting to me. Just I can't get the the image of like a 10-foot tall bird out of my out of my
Right.
mind.
Right. Yeah. I think seeing anything that is that you would expect to be, I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm trying to say there, right? But like just like
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
when you think of a bird, you think of a bird. It's like, usually this big, or if you think even of bigger birds like owls or eagles,
Sure.
they only get so big in wingspan. But I think from like if it's standing,
Yeah.
this giant bird, like that alone is kind of like a freaky image to think about.
It's just off. Like
Yeah,
something is just off with it. Oh my
yeah.
goodness. So I know you said too, right? Like the idea of the bloodsucker, right? And even, it's been referred to as a vampire on some occasions. Um, can it just go in? Does it follow any certain like rules that vampires do? Like, can it just go into your home and, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it seems like it kind of just has free range to hunt as it
As
needs.
it needs.
Um, I know that it said that before they enter a house, part of the folklore is that once they've chosen a house, they'll fly over it in the formation of a cross, so north to south and then east to west, and then they enter. And that even before going out to hunt, the process of the physical transformation is there is even allegedly a ritual for that.
Yeah.
I have it here. I have it pulled up. Is that
Yes.
um, though a Tlahuelpuchi can hunt or shapeshift anytime they need to, once a month they must go through a ritual. After midnight, they light a fire in a kitchen with certain types of wood and leaves that have magical properties. They walk over the fire 3 times, first north to south, then east to west, chanting incantations as they do so. They sit on the fire facing north, their upper body separates from their legs and feet, and they turn into a bird and fly out into the night, leaving their legs behind. If the Tlahuelpuchi doesn't find a victim by daybreak, they will die.
Oh my
So there's
gosh.
yeah, there's a lot of ritual behind that transformation and the hunting as well. It's interesting because when you think of like stories or um, beliefs about like demons, for example,
Sure.
or vampires, there's all these rules. Like a vampire cannot enter your house unless they're invited, or some people believe that you put salt at your door or around you to prevent a demon from getting you because the
Right.
demon must count each grain of salt, and so it slows them down or they won't bother. So it's like, and you would think for evil creatures that they
Right.
would be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna wait for you to invite me in. I'm a monster. I'm gonna do what I
Yeah, I can
want.
do whatever I want.
But suddenly there's all these rules around being a monster and the etiquette of a monster, if you will.
That is such a hilarious way of putting it. Like, there are so many rules, strict ways of doing things, right? And all of these legends, right, that people tell you and the stories that they transmit. But I don't know, it almost makes it more exciting. It makes it more, I don't know, like a spectacle, if you
Mhm.
will, right? Like that
Yeah.
ritualistic process and how it happens. And oh my gosh, it's terrifying.
Oh yeah.
So much time they have on their hands, they must, because that ritual sounds tedious.
I know, right? They're basically just like cooking. Like,
Yeah.
just make a meal instead of having to go out and hunt for human blood.
Yes. Just go
Yeah.
get it. Like at
Yeah.
this point. That's so funny. Oh my gosh, and you mentioned too, I forgot that there is in many tellings, right, the removal of limbs,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. I've heard that also some people tell like their stories of lechuzas in the same way, is that they remove their limbs. There have been accounts of that happening. Because
Yeah.
yeah, up until I started reading about Tlahuelpuchis, I never really heard anybody else talk about the actual act of the transformation for a lechuza. It was just they could just transform.
Yeah.
Versus with the Tlahuelpuchi is there's this again very detailed ritual of how it's supposed to happen.
Right.
So yeah, very interesting. This. I guess, shedding of the human form in a literal sense. You know,
Yes,
they're
yes.
actually becoming something different. They're no longer human.
Mm. It's a metamorphosis. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. And I know you mentioned too, Aiden, that, individuals can be born with it,
Mhm.
right? They could be born and their destiny is to become a Tlahuelpuchi. And I think that is such a big part of the story, right? Is this idea of being cursed almost,
Mhm.
right? This idea of you can't escape the trauma that is going to happen to you or
Mhm.
what you're going to become. And that's almost more horrifying, right? Like, okay, I'm bound to become this monster that everybody has told me I'm going to be, and there's nothing I can do to escape that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very queer coded to me. I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
I don't know what this community, specifically in this case study, what their relationship is to queer people, but to me, I mean, that's if you talk to any queer person, a lot of the times, for a lot of us, it felt that way. It was, "Why was I born this way?
Mm,
Why am I this monster? I wish I was something different." But like you said, is there a Tlahuelpuchi is born a Tlahuelpuchi, and in most cases, and they have no choice, and they're just kind of doomed to live their life
mm.
that way. And so, yeah, it's a very kind of you can draw a lot of parallels between those experiences. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
I mean, it's so much so that the transformation process kind of, I don't know, the how do I say it? Right, like the hyper dramatization of how evil these, beings are and what have you, and it's heartbreaking.
yeah.
It's so heartbreaking. And I'm interested, Aiden, why do you think, right, that queer bodies and queer communities find so much safety or solace or even just like relatability, right,
Mhm.
to the world of the spooky, yes, but monsters like the La Huelpuchi in general?
Yeah. I think again, it's just that idea of seeing yourself represented in some way.
Yeah,
Is these stories are shared and they're told in many different ways, but then when as a queer person, when I see that story being told or in a movie or anything,
yeah,
is I feel like I understand it in a way that maybe a cisgendered straight white person would not get. Is
yeah.
you don't know what that sensation is to feel like a monster simply for existing. Um, and I mean, no shade to anybody, right? But that's just the reality of the situation. Is
Yes,
like
it is.
again, like I mentioned earlier, is I have literally been told to my face, um, or these or I've had these messages or these ideas, told to me that like you are evil, you are bad, you go against nature. When it was just it's a natural thing to be born that way, and Tlahuelpuchis in their existence, again, in most cases, unless they are uh, killed by another family member, and
Sure,
that's where the lore kind of takes a deviation from that experience. But
sure.
yeah, again, I think it's just this idea of seeing yourself represented in some way and saying, okay, this is I'm seeing this story, or I'm interpreting this story from the monster's perspective,
Mm,
whereas somebody else is seeing it from the perspective of the person being attacked or
mhm.
what have you.
Well, let me just say, screw those people. They're
Yeah.
idiots, and who cares about them?
Oh, yeah,
Because they're
absolutely.
wrong. So, whatever. I'm sorry that you had to hear those messages because they couldn't be further from the truth. That's
Yeah.
horrifying and not true in any way.
Yeah.
But I think that's such a beautiful interpretation, and again, also very difficult, also
Mhm.
very hard to kind of process, right? Like when you watch a movie for the first time, for example, and you're like, why am I relating to this monster so much? And you start discovering so much things, or maybe how society views this monster, and then 9 times out of 10, right, the monster gets defeated. And it's terrifying, right, to see yourself in that way,
Mhm.
yet so liberating to be like, I finally see myself somewhere, right? Especially like, I don't know, growing up, right, depending on how families are raised, or how they raised you and you grew up or whatever, right? You may not even hear a story about another queer body until you watch a scary movie. And of course
Mhm.
things are changing now, which is wonderful, but that's just the case. That's just the fact of the matter. You learn who you are through a horror movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not every person's
Sure.
experience who is interested in who has a fascination with horror. I mean that same kind of concept can be applied to different kinds of identities, but also
Mhm.
I'm also not saying that every person who likes horror is marginalized in some way.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just entertainment,
Sure,
and
sure.
I'll say that for myself too. There are definitely some stories and some uh pieces of media that are just they're purely entertainment, because at the end of the day it is also fun to be scared, you
Of
know.
course.
At a very base level, we can all kind of connect on a level of fear, of scaring each other.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun, and you escape, right? It's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
great, I don't have to worry about this bill I have to pay. I can just watch this scary
Yeah.
movie or read a
Hmm.
book or talk to friends about it," right? It's such
Yeah.
a fun, exciting adrenaline rush, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. When did you first hear about the Tlahuelpuchi, Aiden? Do you remember?
Um, I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was definitely when I had already started Susto, and I've just kind
Sure.
of like, when I do research for episodes, I just cast like a wide net, and I'm just kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
violently Google searching and like just trying to see like, okay, is there something out there that I haven't heard of, I haven't seen? And the answer is always yes, because the cultures in the Latin American Hispanic diaspora, there are so many cultures, so many um, communities, even that have different, kind of stories and stuff. But yeah, I think just in my kind of quest for all of these different kinds of stories, as I came
Yeah.
across this one, and then I came across an entry from the book actually that I
Ah,
used for my episode about that night, that Tlahuelpuchi epidemic in Tlaxcala, and
mhm,
I was like, wow, wait, no, hold on, this is something that was documented by a real person, and
mhm.
yeah, it's become one of my like favorite stories to talk about. Yeah,
Gosh. I mean, it's a great one. It's
yeah,
such a great one, and I don't know. I love that. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about legend telling, right? It's different depending on who you hear it from or where you hear
hmm,
it from, right? There's a lot of times where it's localized too, like family members have dealt with it or seen it, or they know where they lurk, and I don't know. It just makes it that much more exciting and
yeah,
exhilarating to hear about. You
yeah.
know. Ugh, I love it. Well, okay, so have you ever heard of any legends or stories or what have you in which the Tlahuelpuchi is defeated?
Mm, not really. I think a lot of what I've read about the Tlahuelpuchi has been around like this one case study, because there's
Yeah.
so much behind it, and there's so much context around that one night. I mean, the book itself that I'm referencing here, they even document the the events leading up to that night. They documented the sleeping patterns in each household, the way that
Wow.
families traditionally kind of lay out the home
Yeah.
and their sleeping habits. So I haven't really, again, come across stories that talk about the defeat of a Tlahuelpuchi, but again, I think it's something that is kind of it's frowned upon. That if a community is being terrorized by a Tlahuelpuchi, they just kind of hope to survive it versus fight it, because again,
Wow.
there is that belief that if you kill one, that you then kind of absorb that
Become one.
curse, if you will, of being one. Yeah.
So powerful. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh. And really, truly, right? It can be such a traumatic experience. And I think it's interesting how this story affects everyone, right?
Hmm.
Like being a monster in this situation, right, affects everybody that it comes in contact with. And I
Yeah.
think there's beautiful metaphor in that, and hard to hear metaphor, but beautiful.
Yeah.
Such a powerful, powerful creature.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, Aiden, I'm curious, why do you think that Tlahuelpuchi has made not only such a big impact, right, on your life, but why do you think they're so constant? Why do you think they're almost, always with you in your area, right? Or you're just always searching to find out more about them?
Yeah, I think I just have a really deep curiosity about it, and I want to learn more. And again, because it's very rare that you find instances of the supernatural or the paranormal that are extremely documented by, I'll say, quote, reliable sources.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but also that's just kind of the nature of the work that I do. Is, I'm doing work and entertainment around scary stories. If you
Yeah.
think about it at a very like plain level, I'm telling ghost stories. And I think one of the earliest criticisms that I got was, someone left in this review that uh, that my sources weren't credible enough. And I remember at first I was like, oh no, they're so right. Like, I'm just like
Ah,
talking out of my ass. And then I was like, I'm telling ghost stories. What do you want? What? But
literally.
also, I think, and again, that was very early on. And so now in doing more of this work is I have been able to find some cases, again, a very little handful of things that are, again, quote, credible sources. And again, that whole idea of what is a credible source when you're talking
Sure.
about folklore and cultural history, um,
Yes.
it can become very messy. But so when I do find something like this book, I kind of latch onto it because I'm like, okay, this is something real and tangible that I can reference, and I can show people, look, here's a graph and here are numbers. And
Yeah.
it makes me really excited because it's kind of like validating, like, okay, I'm not just some weirdo, and my listeners and people who follow Susto are not just, like, weirdos who are obsessed with this. Like, no, there's like a real study to it. The title of this book itself is An Epistemological Study of Anthropomorphic Supernaturalism in Rural Tlaxcala.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
Big words, people.
yeah, so big words make it
Yeah.
real. No, um, yeah, I mean, I guess if anything, I would remind people we don't need the big words to make it real. But
Mm,
again, it does give me this sense of validation when I find something like that. And so I
yeah.
really love just kind of peeling it back layer by layer.
You bring up such a wonderful point and such a toxic point, right? Like, I'm sorry that that comment happened, and I'm sorry it made you feel so insecure and second guessing of your, like, it happens all of the time, and it is so freaking annoying. Like, it is one of the most frustrating things in the world. And I think that's why, we relate, and how much we love folklore and legend telling and storytelling. And it's so infuriating when people believe that that is just not academic enough, it's not smart enough, it's not
Hmm.
real enough. And it's exhausting. it's
Hmm.
it's it's so exhausting to try to constantly prove that you as a being and your culture um are good enough, almost, in a sense, right? To just, can't you just trust the fact that I heard this story,
Hmm.
right? Or my dad told this story. I'm right there with you, Ayden. When I did my thesis on La Llorona, right, and it was my favorite thing in the world, I had so much fun. But you're constantly questioning yourself if you're falling in line academically, right? Are these things credible enough? Like, is what my mom said okay to use as something that I research upon, right? And it's so annoying. Like, we should never have to have to think that way. And at the same token, right, these other academics that are actually bringing this to light, like your book, and being like, look, everybody, look how important this is so revolutionary, and it's something, like, putting us on the map in that way is exhilarating. It's like, oh my gosh, as you said, we're being seen and we're being heard, and our names are up there in other academic settings, and our situations are up there too. And oh my gosh, it's such a mix of emotions being in your position. It's constantly back and
Yeah,
forth.
I've definitely learned to weaponize, I will say,
Mm.
the phrase anecdotal evidence. It's one of my favorite things now. So I'm like, oh,
Mm.
this is anecdotal evidence. And like,
Period.
it's just a story someone told me.
But anecdotal. So
Yeah, exactly.
God, I love it. I love it. And I'm so excited, and I'm just thrilled that, like I said, I can't stop saying that you're doing this show, because again, you're putting these stories on the map, and you're talking about them, and they're being spoken about, and that just does so much. It does so much for communities, right? Everywhere. It really
Thank you.
does.
We are doing that work.
We
And so we're So yeah, no, it's I love coming across people who are doing anything similar, whether it's extremely similar or very little, I'm like, yes, good. Like this is it's a community effort. Let's all keep doing it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's very exciting to do this kind of work, I will say.
It's so much fun. And I'm just waiting until you create some sort of Latine paranormal, otherworldly festival or conference. Just let me know, Ayden. I want to be a part of it.
Well, I mean, not me, but I have a friend who's actually putting together a festival for paranormal creators, and it's very much catered to, I will say, like independent creators,
Oh my
and it's called
gosh.
Beyond the Veil Festival, and you can
Okay.
visit their website beyondtheveilfest.com. So I would
Okay.
encourage you and any other paranormal creators listening to visit the website and
Yes.
send in an interest form or buy a ticket to attend, because I'm going to be there. It's going to be in New Orleans of September 2025.
Oh my God. That
Yeah,
sounds
it's
so
really exciting.
fun.
Yeah,
Are you joking? That sounds so much. Oh my
I'm
gosh.
not joking. Yeah, I'll send you the link and everything to you after
Great.
this.
Okay.
But yeah,
Please, because I'm signing up now. Right after
no,
this call, I'm like, oh,
absolutely.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go to New Orleans. I've never been.
I love it. I've been once before
Yeah.
and I'm excited to go again. Yeah, it's like it's just one of like the paranormal hotspots of the world. The culture and the history in that city alone is so deep and rich and
Ah,
beautiful. And so yeah, it's gonna be really exciting to have that festival there.
congratulations to your friend, because that's so incredible and what a feat. Ah, I love it.
Yes,
I'm so
Lainey
excited.
Hobbs, she's doing the work. I like to call her Slaney Hobbs because she is truly just killing the game. Um,
I
but yeah,
love
I'm
it.
excited to go to that.
Shout out Slaney.
Uh,
Ah, well, unfortunately, we're at our last few questions, Ayden, and I'm excited to see your thoughts. But do you think that the Tlahuelpuchi, at the end of the day, right, is a monster or not? And why?
I think, and I think everyone saw this answer coming, but I'm going to say yes and no. I think that
Yeah.
it's neither yes nor no. Just because, unfortunately, it's just the whether you are born with the curse of being a Tlahuelpuchi or you absorb the curse because you tried to get rid of one. Um, it's just the lore is, again, the rule is that a Tlahuelpuchi must feed on blood to survive.
Hmm,
They are doing what they have to do to live,
yeah,
and obviously we don't want anybody to be the victim of a Tlahuelpuchi, much less innocent infants.
yeah, sure.
Um, but yeah, you think of like sharks in the water. People freak out
Mm.
after shark attacks, and yes, it's tragic, but that is their home. So
Yeah,
it's like
yes.
it's this weird like yeah, it's like, oh no, that's terrible. This person should not have been attacked. No harm should have come to them. But also this creature is just doing what it's doing. A bear is a bear, a shark is a shark, a
Yeah,
Tlahuelpuchi is the Tlahuelpuchi.
yeah,
Um, and again, I mean, this is all folklore, right? So it's like you don't maybe. I don't think I've also ever come across anything that says what goes on in the mind of a Tlahuelpuchi when
sure.
they are once they've transformed. If they're like kind of like, again, the experience of a werewolf. The stories are that when someone becomes a werewolf, they black out. It's
Yeah,
not them anymore. It's now this
exactly.
monster that has taken over their body.
Exactly.
um, so I would assume that the same thing would apply to the Tlahuelpuchi. So I would say the acts and the way in which Tlahuelpuchi must survive is monstrous.
Mm.
But and I think this is just I'm not only am I a Virgo rising, I am a Cancer sun, so I think
Ah,
that part of me comes out, and I'm very empathetic or sympathetic to these monsters and these creatures, and I'm
of
like, well,
course.
that's just the way they are. They can't help it, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah. I wish more people saw the world like you do. I think it's very special and few and far between, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's so beautiful that you're on their side. Me
No,
too.
no, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say
Okay,
that.
okay. In a way that, in
No, I
a
get what you're saying though.
metaphorical.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of.
You
We're
heard it
not.
here first. Ayden Castellanos of Susto.
I know, that's all we need is just like, and they both died mysteriously 2 days later.
There you
That
go, because they invited the Tlahuelpuchis
I
in.
know. No, yeah, no, but no, you have a beautiful heart. It's very obvious, but I
Thank
think
you.
everything you said is correct. Totally in every way. Okay. So,
Mhm.
why do you think, I'm sure that our hour-long conversation proves this, but why do you specifically, Aiden, think that monsters are so important and why should their stories continue to be told?
Yeah. So, in an effort to not just again, like I've been like just full circle ramblings, I
No.
would just reiterate what I said earlier is it's monsters or the stories of monsters are also the stories of creatures or people who are misunderstood and misrepresented.
Yeah.
I think that they allow space for marginalized people to feel represented and to
Mm,
connect with the idea of being othered or villainized.
mm,
And I think it also tells the story of survival through transformation and through changing oneself um, to keep going. Yeah.
it's inspiring.
Yeah.
It really
Being a
is.
monster is
It
inspiring.
is. It is. And let go of the rules sometimes. It's okay. Don't be
Yeah,
so hard on yourself.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay, well, final question, Aiden, and this is one of my favorites because it's a bit silly, but I think it's super impactful. Say you're just chilling, maybe it's today, maybe it's Sunday, you're just chilling in Austin, having a nice time, and
Mhm,
all of a sudden you get in contact with a Tlahuelpuchi.
mhm.
What would you do in that situation? What would you say? How would you react?
So, if I came in contact with the Tlahuelpuchi, are they in their Tlahuelpuchi monster form or their like human pre-hunting form
That
or
is for you to
post-hunting?
decide in this
Okay.
scenario.
Okay. If they were hunting, I'm not exactly sure because it almost, according to the lore, it's almost kind of like hopeless, is they can knock you out with the mist. All you can do is, have the sharp things or the safety pins and a cross on you.
Right.
Um, so I guess maybe I would hope for the best and hope that they wouldn't knock me unconscious as a strange mist or a ball of light. Um, but if someone confided in me that they were a Tlahuelpuchi,
Yeah.
I think I would extend to them grace and curiosity.
Mm.
Um, I think again, the people have told me that Susto it's the nerdy show, and so I would definitely, have a lot of questions for them. They
Yeah.
would probably be really annoyed with me, and they'd be like, "Actually, I don't want this guy's blood. He doesn't shut up." Um, yeah, I think I would just have questions, as I would want to know
Yeah.
more, and it'd be like, "Okay, so we're gonna go through this book,
Yeah.
through this list of
So,
things,
word for
and
word.
you're gonna tell me what's true."
Yeah.
and I think honestly, I would turn it into an episode. I would interview them, and they would be on Susto. There you go.
You're like, here's a mic.
Exactly, in true me fashion, I would turn it into content. Yeah,
uh, but at the same time, right, still being kind and empathetic and learning
Absolutely.
about them, which is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Instead of interview with the vampire, it would be interview with the Tlahuelpuchi. Got it.
Perfect. It markets itself.
We're on to something here.
I love it. I love it. That is the most aided response. I think that is a perfect way to handle that situation.
Oh yeah.
Well, Aiden, thank you so much for being on the show. It truly means so much to all of us, and we're so thankful and so excited for the future of your work and to keep listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. This episode of Floaties for Krakens was written and recorded by me, Camille Maria Acosta. A monstrous thank you to Ayden Castellanos for such a remarkable interview. A big thank you to Michael Kosman for producing a stellar episode, and a huge thank you to Natalie Hedberg for designing such a phenomenal logo. And music for the show was also written and produced by me, with a special appearance by my tata, Toby Acosta. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's show. It truly means everything to me. If you have questions or curiosities about the research or media referenced in this episode, everything will hopefully be in the description box. You can find us on our website and our socials, links in the description as well. Anyway, thanks again for being here, everyone. And just a reminder, it's okay to be afraid of the monster, but it's also okay to love the heck out of it too. Keep being monstrous and keep shining bright.